Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Today was an eventful day in Germany. The Bevölkerungsschutzgesetz, the Population Protection Act, or as it is seen by many people, the Enabling Act of Merkel's government, has been ratified by both the upper and the lower house, by both the Bundestag and the Bundesrat. And I read that also our president has already signed it, so it is in effect already now. And how practical is that? A single majority vote of the Bundestag also declared that the state of emergency, the evil pandemic, still persists in Germany, and all the restrictions that we have and more are still necessary, of course. And that is it in a nutshell. A single majority vote of the German parliament is enough to go around our constitution and give far-reaching authority to the German government. A whole catalog of fundamental rights and protected liberties can be violated by our government and our authorities under this pretense from now on. So in today's video, I want to go over the events in Parliament and on the streets of Berlin, and I want to break it down for you. But before we go into that, I want to thank all my supporters and my subscribers once again. If you like these presentations, like and subscribe, but most importantly, share these videos with people who you think might be interested in what is going on in Germany. If you want to support my work, you can do so directly via PayPal or via Patreon or Subscribestar. You find the links in the description down below. Alright, so let's start where I left off. Earlier today I told you that thousands of people were protesting in Berlin against this new law, and at that time it was still a draft. The police, however, was using severe escalation tactics, and they even started to shoot at the crowd with these heavy water cannons. The only reason for that was that many people in the crowd were not wearing their face masks. In the radio today, I heard that these protests were violent, but not wearing a face mask is not violence in my book at least. So nowadays it already qualifies as violence when I don't have a mask on. And that can be taken as an excuse now to arrest you or to end an orderly and perfectly legal demonstration. So the Bundestag was actually debating about this draft at the very time when the police was dispersing the crowds in front of the Brandenburg Gate. A parliamentarian of the AfD, the Patriotic Opposition Party, was getting messages on his cell phone from people who were demonstrating outside. He read those messages in Parliament and told people so that all people in Parliament know what is going on at the moment outside, what is happening there. When you watch the video, you can hear parliamentarians actually booing at that. So they do not want to be told what the police is doing at the moment to the people outside. Let that sink in for a while. As our health minister, Jens Spahn, was starting his speech, there was a little protest in parliament from the side of the AfD party. They all raised these white boards with the word Grundgesetz, basic law, that is the name of our so-called constitution. And there was a black ribbon attached signifying that today the constitution is laid to rest. I heard several public broadcasting journalists complaining actually about the AfD wanting to discuss about this law. They said this law should be passed as fast as possible, and every hour that you talk about this is just wasted time. Just get it passed. Don't discuss about it. No discussions. Of course, I was reminded of the way that mainstream journalists in the US are talking now about recounts and maybe some sort of an investigation into what was actually going on during the voting and the vote counting. They also say that you shouldn't be interested in that even. You shouldn't discuss about it. You shouldn't talk about it. There shouldn't be any investigations, and votes shouldn't be counted. Because a good citizen is not interested in these things. He just moves along and watches TV. So Mr. Gauland was then, for example, criticizing that there is no trust anymore between the government and the citizens, and that these protests outside of the parliament, or very close to it at least, are an expression of that. In this context, it is very, well, you might say funny or you might say scary, depending on where you stand on the issue. But Mr. Spahn, our health minister, he said, "I give you my word. During this pandemic, there will not be forced vaccinations." Now, I think there are two things that are worth noting or pointing out in this sentence. First of all, he said during this pandemic. So, well, if maybe something mutates and we find a new word, a new name for the new pathogen, then we can have forced vaccinations, no problem. I was just talking about that pandemic in 2020. 2021, that's a new pandemic now. And then there is a more fundamental thing that worries me about this. Jens Spahn gave us his word, so I think we can assume the opposite to be true. Alright, so let's go over the results right now. A majority of 413 members of parliament out of 708 were voting in favor of this new law. 235 were voting with no, 8 were undecided, and 52 didn't vote at all. So before we break this down by party, let me just say as a little side note here, in case you're wondering, yes, the German Bundestag is enormous. It is actually the second largest parliament in the entire world, on the entire planet, and technically you could maybe say it's the largest one, or it's not a parliament at all. It really depends on how you look at these things, because what is the largest, let's say parliament or assembly in the world? It is the Chinese National People's Congress, of course, with almost 3,000 members. But is that really a parliament? I don't know. Is the German Bundestag a real parliament? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like that the German Bundestag is actually closer to a People's Congress than to the parliament of a liberal, albeit representative democracy, but still. And this is exactly why one of the things that I really don't like about this new law is that a single majority in parliament is enough. And as you know, this parliament also elects the chancellor. And that means that normally the government, of course, has a single majority always in parliament. And what really annoys me about this is that the coalition parties, the parties that rule Germany, can basically go around the constitution without any votes of the opposition being required. Because a single majority normally does not require opposition votes. And that is something that is really scary, I think. So it seems like the bar for going around our constitution has become really, really low if you can use the pretense of some kind of an infectious disease in the future. So let's look at the voting results by party. Here you can see that by and large, Angela Merkel's CDU and the Bavarian CSU party were almost entirely approving of this law. The same goes for the Social Democrats and for the Green Party. The only parliamentarians who were not in favor of this law, that was the AfD, the Liberal Party FDP, the Communist Party Die Linke, and people who aren't in a faction. The only people who outright call this law an enabling act is the AfD. The communists said, for example, that this law is not paving the way towards a dictatorship in their opinion, however it is still a bad law. And the Liberal Party said that it is blurry in some passages and things are not very well defined. But the way I read the articles, fundamental opposition and fundamental disagreement only came from the AfD this time. Alright, that was it from my side. The way that I have seen these protests, I can tell you that this was probably only the beginning. German people, German citizens, and especially the people who are already active in resisting this government, they will not just go home quietly. I think their protest will really start from now on. They are very peaceful so far. What we have seen here were not riots, it was civil disobedience. They were just sitting down on the ground and they did not comply with the order to disperse. However, some of them were aggressive. Remember what I said about these anti-pandemic demonstrations? They are a very heterogeneous, very mixed group of people from all sorts of backgrounds. The overwhelming majority of them is peaceful. Many of them are leftist hippies. But there were also some hooligan-like figures among them, of course. But this is a tiny minority. Most of the people were peaceful and they used civil disobedience, and I think this is what we will see in Germany for the most part from now on. I'm curious at seeing how this story will develop, and of course, I will follow up on these events on this story. Take care. Servus, Kameraden.